to hear what you have to say about this project, which is still a work in progress. And then we'll ask you to join us by Michael's model, Future, on the other side of the building, where we'll have more informal conversation, enjoy some wonderful hors d'oeuvres and bites, and some more drinks. 100 years ago, in 1926, the American bakeries, please come in. Hi, how are you, Joe? 100 years ago, in 1926, the American Bakeries Company opened its doors to feed a booming city and a growing population as one of the first industrial bakeries in South Florida. It helped anchor a new residential community, an industrial neighborhood called Wynwood. The bakery alone provided nearly 300 jobs to people who lived here, and mostly as homeowners. But in 1978, the ovens went cold. Globalization hollowed out Miami's garment and manufacturing districts, which is what was located in what we now call the Wynwood Arts District. It lost its economic foundations, jobs disappeared, families moved away to seek other opportunities, and the neighborhood went into decline. Around the same time, another kind of displacement was well underway. Artists who had been working in Coconut Grove were being pushed out of the then escalating rental market during a wave of revitalization that was occurring then. This was like in the 1980s. Rather than accept that artists would always be nomadic in Miami, a small group of artists working with the city of Miami and Miami-Dade County made a radical decision. They acquired this abandoned bakery and its site with a singular goal to ensure that Miami artists had permanence in the city of Miami. That bold impression act became the Bakehouse Art Complex. For the past 40 years, Bakehouse has been doing what it set out to do. Hi there, Shel. We've supported thousands of artists by providing affordable studios, fabrication spaces, professional opportunities, and a strong peer community. Roughly 120 artists work out of this space today. Several of them are here among us. Since we couldn't accommodate our entire artist community, Michael was so kind to give a presentation to them separately before this presentation. And every single day of the year, we offer free public programming and educational programming to the community, nourishing the neighborhood in new ways. Instead of by providing bread, we provide cultural production. We turn to creativity and culture. We are not new to this neighborhood. We're deeply rooted in it, and we're really rooted in its success. But as Miami has grown and rapidly and successfully urbanized, we've reached another inflection point. By 2018, it became clear that studios alone were no longer sufficient to sustain and retain talent. Artists were being priced out of housing, affordable workspaces were disappearing, creatives were being displaced again, and this time a function of real estate growth and speculation rather than economic decline. We realized if we want artists to stay in our city and maintain Miami's reputation as a global center of creative and cultural production, then we needed a more holistic solution. So we slowed down, we got our house in order, we stabilized our business and financial practices, we built a professional team addressing critical structural and electrical repairs, thanks to our champion City of Miami Chairwoman and Commissioner Christine King, who, if the commission meeting is over and can get over here, will be here to join us. And we grew and attracted and invested in and developed an amazing community of artists. We've also grown our donor base, we've tried to prove our worth, and we've been building a board that is leading us into the future. Most importantly, we listened. Over the last 8 years, Bakehouse has engaged deeply with our artists, our Wynwood Norte neighbors, civic and cultural leaders, planners and funders. We've helped spearhead the creation of the Wynwood Norte Community Enhancement Association. I'd like to recognize Yoni Bornstein, who's the president and one of the people who, at the very beginning, mobilized with me and others this association. And we were all committed to co-create a participatory and community-driven vision plan for this neighborhood, which has now been codified by the City of Miami as the Wynwood Norte Neighborhood Revitalization District. That overlay protects and incentivizes affordability. It ensures appropriateness of scale, density, and character of the neighborhood, which is one of Miami's most beloved historic neighborhoods. That groundwork mattered because permanence requires policy, patience, and precision, not just vision. This year, as we celebrate our 40th anniversary and this building's 100th, we received an extraordinary and unexpected opportunity, the chance to acquire the adjacent abutting site, made possible through the generosity of Debbie and Jeff Wexler, the Bremen Family Foundation, the Knight Foundation, the Wege Foundation, Arison Arts Foundation, and an anonymous board gift. And that brings us to Future. Future is not a project name, it's a proposition and a provocation. To you, the community, and to others who aren't here. It's a compound where culture compounds, a place deliberately designed to create the conditions where creative forces lose their boundaries and become something transformative. We all know Miami is a city of breakthroughs, where culture developments happen first, where passion, innovation, and ideas collide, not by accident, but by proximity. We are the future. Future takes that idea seriously. Designed in collaboration with Michael Maltzan Architecture, informed by program, economic, and market analysis from board expertise, Paratus Group, Paul Lambert Advisory, Surya and Bernard Ziskovich, many pro bono hours of our attorneys, Shar Amami Shah, and Wes Hevia, among other building design and economic advisors, and shaped by years of dialogue, both internal and external. Future is an artist-serving and creativity-driven campus that integrates affordable housing, studios, fabrication and civic spaces, shared green and social spaces, designed not just for use, but for collision. For the informal proximities where new ideas actually take form. This includes now close to our 3-acre campus, which hopefully will produce roughly 200 units of affordable housing, 100 of which are now possible with the new addition of this recent land acquisition, alongside renovated and new studios, cultural and community serving spaces, and a campus that insists on real engagement. This isn't about helping artists survive. Come on in. Nan and Bruce, thank you for coming. Come in. This isn't about helping artists survive. Maybe Phil can get a couple cheers. It's about building permanent cultural infrastructure that fuels Miami's economy and is critical to our city's local identity. Instead of pricing artists out of our city, Future expands the footprint of artists. Instead of performative collaboration, it insists on proximity, friction, and shared purpose. It's a think tank with paint on its hands, where artistic creativity, intellectual rigor, and civic imagination fuse into action. This is a project of scale and seriousness. The full Bakehouse campus will require at least or approximating $100 million investment, $25 million of which will be our donation of the site. The last $25 million will come from a tax-exempt bond. So we really need to all get together and raise $50 million from private foundation and public partners, and have a clear, achievable path to completion by 2030. We want our capital deck to be 50% philanthropy, please come in, 50% philanthropy, 25% our land value, and 25% a 501c3 tax-exempt bond. Is that right?
In addition to all the other local and state and federal subsidies that we can get our hands on.
Yes. Sure.
Happy, let's pause for a second. Give the numbers.
Okay.
Let's get the crowd in here. Come on.
Hi there. Sorry, I didn't realize so many people were here. Hi, Claudia. All right, I get to start all over. Jason. When we are able to pull off this project, it not only will sustain artists, it'll sustain our neighborhood and Bakehouse for decades ahead, and also allow us to reinvest our earnings to support and attracting more talent and develop more talent. Whether this is the kind of project, whoops, sorry. I knew there'd be a glitch. And now we move from imagining to building. Can you imagine that? The next phase of this work is really practical and urgent. advancing campus design development, moving forward into our architectural and engineering coordination, engaging a mission-aligned developer partner, continuing our conversations with the City of Miami, as I mentioned, championed by Chairwoman Christine King and our District Commissioner, and Dade County Commissioner Ken Hardiman, who is our District County Commissioner, around the county land, which we've created a speculative project, but with only the idea of hoping to engage them in a possibility as opposed to a right, a right to declare, and infrastructure, and with all of you around the long-term public benefit of what we're doing. Tonight is that part of the work. We invited you here not to just present a plan, but to test a plan, to ask whether this feels right for Miami. Does it reflect the urgency of the moment? And whether this is the kind of project that could rally all of us across sectors toward delivery. Breakthrough minds and breakthrough cultures deserve breakthrough cities with breakthrough conditions. Michael Maltzan is an architect whose work understands culture in buildings not as ornament, but as essential civic infrastructure, and who has helped us translate 8 years of thinking into a vision that is both ambitious and achievable. To properly introduce him, I invite Dean Khoury to make a few remarks and put Michael's body of work into a much broader architectural context. Thank you all for being here.
Kathy, I'm afraid I misunderstood my assignment. I didn't know I was going to do the introduction, but I was just going to share some thoughts about Michael and his work. So for the introduction, I would have needed that long list of achievements, accomplishments, awards, publications. Maybe it's better.
You're on the wall by future.
Because that list is way too long, so we won't dwell on this. So I have to improvise. So I can tell you that from what I know that Michael studied at the Rhode Island School of Design. That's where he got his bachelor, and we were classmates. I can tell you, there's always that person you know was going to succeed, right? There was that spark from the beginning, and that was Michael. There's no surprise, we knew it. And Rocco, I just saw Rocco, another classmate, he can also attest to that. Then he went on to the GSD for his master's, worked with giants in the field for a while, Alvaro Siza, Frank Gehry, Machado and Silvetti, and he established his practice in the late 90s, and the rest is history. Huge impact on the field for several reasons. One of them is that it's the diversity of the work. I don't know of any practitioner who has excelled in so many registers and scales. Usually we know some architects who really shine in one genre, let's say institutional buildings, but he does affordable housing and the big high-profile institutional buildings at the same level of intense excellence and great innovations. This is very unusual. So what I wanted to talk about was I wanted to reflect from the perspective of a dean from academia, because although Michael's greatest impact is on the profession, and he has not had a permanent academic position. He has had many visiting roles, but I think deliberately chose not to assume this academic full-time role. He has a formidable presence in academia. One of the few architects that looms very large and is in every discussion in the context of the classroom and the studio. Why? Because the work is so rich with ideas. It provokes discussion and reflection, compelling us to think differently about architecture every day. So I'm going to tell you a story. We are now engaged in a strategic planning exercise, and we had a board meeting just yesterday with my advisors. One of them is here, Larry, is part of the Dean's advisory committee. And we were basically talking to Michael, we invited Michael to talk to us and about the challenges that the profession faces, but also in the context of the university, what should we be looking at? What directions should the higher education and architecture take? And we end up actually dwelling on the Bakehouse project. That's what this is the example that became like a compass, a lighthouse for the discussion. This is what we wanted to do. It exemplified what we should be teaching, what our students should be learning. It's a project that is all about the city. It's about community. It's about, it's a catalyst for interaction and culture in the city. Also, it is very compelling, almost iconic. Yes, iconic, I should say that, in terms of its formal intricacy. It doesn't choose between one or the other. Usually when we have works that are socially engaged, they tend to shy away from that formal exuberance that we connect with Michael. So it did everything, addressed sustainability, resilience, affordability. It's an amazing project that condenses all of these themes in a very, very eloquent way and became our exemplar in terms of where we want the school to go. So I just wanted to share this with you so that you know that this project is not only a gift, an amazing gift for Bakehouse and its neighborhood and its community, it's a gift to the field because of the richness of ideas that it embodies.
Wow. Fantastic. Thank you. I hope somebody taped that because I want a copy. Thank you, Kathy and Rudy, for the introductions to me, but also I think contextualizing this project, the Bakehouse project, in really profound ways. And I think that it is quite easy after the number of months and years that we spent working with Kathy on this project, to say that this project really has a kind of profound quality to it, and certainly is a project that will resonate in Miami, but also a project that is a kind of model for cities around the world. I don't think we should shy away from that. I think what Bakehouse is already doing, what it'll be able to do with this expansion and remaking, is nothing short of a kind of revolution around how you think about institutions and their role in helping to build community and evolve contemporary cities. I wanted to just touch for a moment. Our work is, as both Kathy and Rudy alluded to, extensive in terms of its program types, but also where we work. We have the good fortune of working in many cities, often many cities that are confronting a number of the same questions that Miami is confronting around affordability, around building community, around sustainability, around their future. Our work is always trying to address these questions. As Rudy mentioned, we are also fortunate to work on a number of different program types that include commercial projects, mixed-use projects, cultural projects, both for universities, but also institutions. It's really one of the founding program types. Our office started with an art school in downtown in Skid Row, a portion of Los Angeles. But that work has also expanded to infrastructure with the new 6th Street Viaduct, where we're trying to imagine how infrastructure, which tends to be a kind of monoculture, really just does one thing, gets cars from one side of the city to another, can take on other responsibilities. And I think that's one of our goals in our work, but I think it's one of the responsibilities for architecture as a whole to try to do more with projects so that they become more resonant and more active in cities. A big part of our work has been in housing, almost from the very beginning. And that spans from market rate housing to the deepest affordability, including permanent supportive housing for formerly homeless individuals. And that work has been a constant part of our portfolio because it really gets at, I think, one of the most significant questions confronting any contemporary city today, and that is the question of affordability. If cities ever have an existential crisis or an existential question, I think often at this point, that question is around affordability and access. And Bakehouse is a project that is pointed exactly at that question. Kathy mentioned, of course, the history of Bakehouse, which I think is quite amazing. An organization that started around 40 years ago by a group of artists who had been more or less evicted from their Coconut Grove studios, and then found the abandoned Flowers Bakery that we're in now, converting that to Bakehouse. That idea that a group of artists started the institution, I think, continues to resonate in the DNA of this organization. It's now supporting 100 artists at any given time, but I think it's also interesting to project that while on a yearly basis you might be dealing with quite exceptional 100 artists, those artists continue to go on, move out to this city, other places, and so in a way, Bakehouse is the author of a growing diaspora of influence in the artistic community. This is from right over here, this image, which I saw today, and I wanted to get it into the talk because I think it has everything to do with what we're really trying to achieve. The idea that an artist came for the space, but then they stay for the community. And then you realize that they're one and the same. And I think you can expand that idea not only to the artists who are working here in Bakehouse, but between Bakehouse and the community of Wynwood and Wynwood to the city as a whole. That idea that Bakehouse is completely ingrained in this larger idea of helping to make and sustain community is really a guiding idea, a guiding principle for the work that we're trying to do. That's not an abstract idea. That idea really relates to the people who are connected to Bakehouse, the artists, of course, but the community members who live around Bakehouse, and the people who come to Bakehouse to participate in the programs, to see what artists are making, to sit and hear about the future of Bakehouse. And I think that idea that this is really a project that is made up of really a group, a community of individuals is extremely important. I want to get into I can't go back too much. I want to get into this is okay. This is the most unusual chair I've ever talked from. But I'm gonna see it through just because of the novelty of it. I want to talk about the project in a little bit more specificity, of course. As you know, the site is bounded by 95 freeway, 32nd Street, 33rd Street to the north, and then the county site, which is which you see, I'll move back just for a second, here along Fifth Avenue. So the block is more or less divided into almost 1/3 and 2/3. The core program that we're working with for the Bakehouse project includes the remaking of the Flowers Bakery buildings, keeping the essential kind of quality, and as I was talking with the artist today, a kind of sense of the ecosystem of this place. It has such history, it's so conducive to artist practice. We don't want to lose that, but the building arguably needs an update in terms of its systems, in terms of a lot of the electrical and mechanical systems. So our goal is to not lose the qualities, but to make a new bakehouse that captures those qualities. That's in the red buildings, which are the 5 original bakery buildings, including this piece of the building that we're in, which is one of my favorite parts of the building, and you'll see why in a minute, but this sawtooth roof is so iconic to this kind of a factory building. And I think really, again, resonates with this idea that Bakehouse is a place of making. It is a kind of cultural factory, if you will, and that's an important quality as well. We're expanding Bakehouse with additional artist studios and creative business space in the yellow portion facing 33rd Street. And then that piece of the building, which has a serrated roof, a kind of skylit roof like this portion of the existing bakehouse, swoops around and almost fluidly slides out to the entry for the main campus at 32nd Street, creating a new kind of porch entry. There will be also access from 33rd Street, so that the whole neighborhood is connected to the inner life of Bakehouse. We're not trying to create a citadel. This is really a much more porous and open campus that connects to the community around it. At the center will be a new garden, a garden that, you'll see some images in a minute of that, but a garden that is really the center of the campus, this open space accessible to everybody. But we have this ambition that that garden can be a number of things. It could be a beautiful place to be and a garden to look at, but we think it could also be a kind of productive garden, a kind of community garden where things are grown that are useful to people. Along 6th Avenue and 95, the freeway, we are planning a taller building, which would be apartments, affordable apartments for artists, affordable housing for artists. We're saying 60 units here, but we've been continuing to work with that, and we think we can take that up to about 100 units of affordable artist housing. And it's located there, one, because it's taller and being against 6th Avenue and the freeway, the scale seems more appropriate as opposed to facing the smaller scale of the residential neighborhood. But we also have this ulterior motive, which is that it acts almost like a kind of billboard to people passing by on the highway, so that there's a question people might ask: what is that and who lives there? And the answer is, of course, artists making something of real value and importance in Miami. We want the building to reach out, even visually, to make connections with the people who are passing by the Bakehouse site. Kathy mentioned the purchase of additional site, which is that lower grade building along 32nd Street. We're still very early in thinking about that, but in some of our tests, we've begun to look at adding more affordable housing. We think we can do around 95 units, which would be an incredible expansion of the dream, the goal of creating real affordability for artists on the site. We've also looked at just developing a very concept massing for the county site off of 5th Avenue between 32nd and 33rd. It's not a design. We're not making the presumption that that is the design, but we just wanted to understand what the scale might be like for about 250, 260 units that we think should try to step down a bit to the massing of Bakehouse, so it's not overwhelming Bakehouse. But interestingly, the ground floor at the street is very important because it could have uses like a grocery store, which doesn't really exist in this neighborhood, which is a bit of a food desert for the community that lives here as a whole, but also, of course, as more artists are living here, would be a real amenity for them as well. This is just a different style of rendering where you begin to get a sense of the overall complex and the possibility of green space moving from 33rd Street through between the county site and Bakehouse out to 32nd Street and really being that courtyard heart of Bakehouse and the shade canopy which comes out to meet 32nd Street. And here you see it in a more of an aerial perspective, and where you really get the sense that this could be a kind of welcoming porch, a kind of entry canopy for Bakehouse, but again, the community that lives around this neighborhood. I've always loved during Bakehouse events, we're coming in and out of this entry, but when you come over in and out over by the other gate and the gallery, it's interesting how many people just hang out on the sidewalk as everybody's leaving. It doesn't seem like anybody actually wants to go. Maybe they're waiting for Uber or something, but everybody ends up in this conversation. We should try to make more out of that. And so we're thinking of the landscape becoming more almost like an outdoor amphitheater that people can hang out in a garden series of steps, either just meeting each other or waiting for that Uber ride. The canopy slides back. Underneath the canopy can be more community functions. We've got spaces there that we're thinking would be potentially community library, education space, as well as a cafe that can be used by people coming to Bakehouse, but of course by the surrounding neighborhood. You start to see the green area at the center, the studios in the making spaces off of 33rd Street, and then the housing as it rises up along the freeway with the elevator in that kind of tall cylindrical element, which is intentionally making a relationship to those iconic silos at Bakehouse, and again trying to reinforce the idea that the history of this place is as a kind of factory, as a making place. Turning around and looking back at Bakehouse across the houses and across 33rd Street, the scale really comes down. And for me, that's very important, that the scale is really more at the scale of the houses across the street. So they're in more of a dialogue. That entire length we're planning can be a kind of extension of the idea of a front porch, where the studios can have roll-up doors, sliding doors, where they can open up to that porch, and that the making inside of Bakehouse can begin to spill out to those spaces in dialogue with the street and the life of the neighborhood next to it. You also get a sense here of some of those paseos that allow access from the street into Bakehouse, into the center of Bakehouse. And beyond that, we are looking at how we can strengthen the roofs of the existing buildings to use some of the roofs as outdoor space. We likely add canopies to those, but really the intention is to create not just interior space for people, the artists at Bakehouse, to do things with, but outdoor space as well, where you could do an installation or a kind of party or do projections at that point. Also, you're really looking out over the cityscape from there. The plan of Bakehouse is quite intricate. As I mentioned, you can see in this section of the plan the new studios that are organized really with a series of hallways and corridors that are not just a series of kind of straight lines and dead ends, but are more fluid and bend, and then eventually connect to the garden. The idea being that as you move around, they're not seen as corridors, but kind of extensions of a garden pathway, that the campus slides between inside and outside in a more fluid and a more dynamic, more generous, graceful way. The courtyard at the center, community program I was mentioning, more library-like space, classroom spaces off of the main campus entry. Housing comes and touches down. It's not elevated above, it's really coming down to the street. We want to make sure that all of the streets are more active in the surrounding block. The artist studios and the creative businesses facing 33rd Street. And then the idea for the county site, of course, there would be quite a bit of parking, but along Fifth Avenue, the potential for quite a large food market. We also think that the edge adjacent to Bakehouse should be thought of ideally as spaces that are used in parallel with Bakehouse itself. And so we've talked about community art, education center. Today with the artists, there was a conversation about it being used as a kind of flexible space that could allow for dance and performance, both performances, but also rehearsals. So the idea is that all of the campus is really knit together, integrated together. And this is, I'm going to get very architecturally wonky here, but this is a figure ground diagram, which is something that I love drawing. A lot of architects like, and what it's doing is it's flipping the diagram. It's making all of the interior spaces the dark color and the pathways the white color. But here you really get to see how fluid the idea for the design and the movement through Bakehouse is. And that has real consequence when you start to look at what it would be like being in the campus. Here are some of the elevated pathways, which are elevated up slightly to be at the level of Bakehouse. If you've walked around Bakehouse, you know that you have to come up a ramp or stairs. We're trying to create a level to all of the accessible spaces at the existing Bakehouse level so that artists aren't having to cart things up and down. Of course, it makes for a more accessible campus as a whole, but we also know that we have water issues. There is a fairly high water table here. So the pathways would be slightly elevated, allowing the garden to create a series of lower, almost sunken gardens. So when it rains and there's water, they can have time to perk back into the ground and water and aquifer, but also would allow you to still walk around the campus and not have to move through those pools. You can see the canopy as it slides out to 32nd Street. These are really areas that are shady areas. They're areas to connect, to meet, but also for artists to take over and make things. The building is a kind of armature for the artists to take over and really bring their work from outside of the studio to the structure of Bakehouse as a whole. There's a spiral stair up to that upper deck level, cafe in Bakehouse just to the right of that space. And then looking back along the Paseo to 33rd Street, you can see that passageway, the studios on the left, which would be a mix. They have to, we'd like them to be as open as possible, but of course the artists have to be able to control that. And so we're working on how to give the artists flexibility to close their space off when they're making things, but to also open it up when they want to either have that view into the garden or to really welcome the community into their making spaces. On the right-hand side, you're seeing that edge along the county space that we're suggesting could be more education and arts-related spaces. Those fluid lines really do have an effect on the inside. And this view coincidentally, luckily, is almost exactly from where I'm sitting. Because as that passageway is sliding around and eventually curving out to the garden, overhead you have the sawtooth roof, which we're all sitting under right now. This isn't exactly the way the studios and the meeting spaces would be made, but it's a suggestion of the different types of spaces. There are individual spaces, there are spaces that are shared as studios between artists, but there are also group making spaces. And one of the real goals of this work with Bakehouse is to create true shop spaces that have the latest equipment that are useful for artists who may not even have a studio here, but who can use Bakehouse for the capabilities that all of its equipment would really provide. So Bakehouse in that way would have an even larger footprint. From the highway looking back, this elevation of housing, we're beginning to develop a kind of scrim or screen along that facade that might create almost a bit of a moire pattern as you pass by, with the idea that the facade would have a kind of shimmering effect to the cars during the day as you pass by. This idea that the facade of Bakehouse is almost in motion, which I think starts to communicate a lot of the dynamic of what's happening inside. But at night, it can also become a kind of lantern to the cars passing by on the highway, but also to the community that is adjacent to Bakehouse. And here we're showing the existing buildings maybe beginning to have some larger cutouts that would create visibility, a kind of picture window to, for instance, in this case, the wood shop, so that the activity inside the building is really a part of the streetscape. I want to finish here with this night view. I think it looks, it shows Bakehouse as this kind of glowing campus, almost suffusing with energy that begins to spill out to the neighborhood and the city around it. You begin to get a sense that the surfaces could be projection surfaces. They can be taken over, and even we've had some renderings where the sides of the affordable housing, the apartments, start to have projections as well. You see the sawtooth roof on the lower portion of Bakehouse, the skylights, but that sawtooth roof starts to get flipped up and it becomes the geometry for the facade of the housing, with the idea that all of the architecture continues to point to this more integrated idea about Bakehouse, between living and working. But the other reason I like this image is because you really see the city in relationship to it. And Rudy talked about this really beautifully in his introduction. This idea that Bakehouse is so related to the idea of the future of the city. I think Bakehouse is clearly about the arts. It's clearly about creation. It's clearly about the neighborhood. But I think it is a kind of microcosm of a city, that Bakehouse becomes a kind of test case for what Miami can continue to evolve into as this incredibly dynamic city. And I was mentioning with the group of artists that we were meeting before, and I think I touched on this last night at the university, this idea that if you look at the history of cities that have evolved into really great world cities, they tend to go through this arc. They begin as places that are very dynamic for lots of reasons, but they're affordable. They're places that the people who are creating things, who are making things, where they can live and they can work. And that fuels the kind of interest and dynamic personality, the identity of those cities. But eventually those cities continue to grow and they become wealthier, and they really are cities that are more and more places to see things. They become extraordinary places to see all of the things that have been made, and for culture to almost be imported at times to those institutions. And that's important as well. And Miami is clearly at that place with the growth of all of the cultural institutions. But there's always this moment where that success has the danger of beginning to push a lot of the creative culture of the city outside, further and further from the core of the city and the core identity of the city. And I think the greatest cities are the cities in which it's fantastic to both see things, but to also make things. And that idea, along with this idea of culture really driving connection within community, is absolutely the mandate and the core of what Bakehouse is doing. And I'm excited that the architecture has the opportunity to reinforce that, to be really a kind of armature for this incredible, futuristic, and very beautiful vision that Kathy and Bakehouse have been continuing to evolve. Really appreciate the attention. It's great to be able to talk about Bakehouse with everybody. Thank you very much.
Michael, thank you for that incredible, detailed vision for Bakehouse. And one of the concepts, you might want to stay up.
Okay. Okay. All right.
So one of the concepts that I deal with a lot in my work is this idea that almost all organizations are on a default path to the future. And to really change things, you've got to get off that default path and imagine a different future. And what you were able to do just now is really envision a future that is completely different than the past. And that's an amazing thing you did for us. What we're going to do now, this is going to be fun.
Stay away from
Yes. Is have an open discussion, right? And in the knowledge that no plan ever survives its first contact with the market. Right? That's the truth. It's used in startups. We believe that here because our job is to constantly iterate, get better, test things. And so what we want to do now is have an open discussion here and now about what you folks saw that was fantastic, where you see gaps in the vision, and where we might and how we might make it better. So what I love to do when posed with this kind of challenge is, if we all take a minute, if everybody can sort of grab their phone, open up their notes, think for a minute or two, or a minute and a half, and just jot down some ideas so that we can have a discussion and you're able to actually solidify your thinking, so that when we open up, we can all have our thoughts consolidated. So shall we do that? 2 minutes? Okay, let's go. Phones out.
I'll take the time.
Paul, thank you for coming and for contributing to not only the Bakehouse, but as you were saying earlier, not only the Bakehouse, not only Wynwood Norte, not only Wynwood, but the city of Miami, because it's all connected. I've been in Wynwood Norte for 10 years. This is and I know how passionate Kathy has been, and she's done everything. Turned over every stone to get to this point. So just congratulations to Kathy and the board for bringing you into this deal and getting to this point. But I think the campus looks absolutely amazing. It's something that the city as a whole sorely needs, is that it's affordable, but there's space to breathe. It's not just a concrete jungle of how do we maximize density and not think about anything else other than just the most amount of units in the least amount of space. So I happen to love the design and the openness and the connection it has with the community. So I think you've done an unbelievable job.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Kathy mentioned collisions, and when we think about the affordability problem, we think in terms of equity creating an environment that's fair, that where people can live well and at reasonable cost. But there's something else that happens, which is this idea of creating dynamism in a community where people can come in, that they can actually live in an environment that fosters more creativity and allows people to actually not be pressured in the day-to-day like they otherwise would. And I think one of the things that came across was this idea of community and building out something that's sustainable for the long term, right? It is permanent. And that permanence is a very unusual thing, especially in Miami. Did anybody have any other thoughts?
I have a question. Are you a question or just thoughts?
Yes. Well, thoughts, questions?
Hi. As some of you know, I'm involved with an organization that is also building a building. So I'm going to ask some of the questions that we were asked. Where is the parking? And also, what is the size of the studios? Are you envisioning different sizes for studios? Because what we encounter in Miami is that there are not many spaces that have large studios for artists who want to do large scale things. And a kitchen, where's the kitchen?
All very good questions. To the parking question, I'm not showing the lower parking plan, but there is parking underneath where you see the artist studios and creative businesses. That piece, as I mentioned, the floor is raised a little bit, and so we have a semi-submerged parking below that, and its entry is off of 6th Street, so you see that curved ramp that comes down to access that. The semi-submerged parking is there for a few reasons. One, of course, it's a little bit less expensive to build. We can more naturally ventilate it, and it helps pull it out of the depth, pushing it into the water table. It allows us to bring some natural light into the garage as well. The studios are really a mix, and there's still a great deal of work tuning that mix of studios. What we've shown is a basic layout that runs from single studios, 2 people in a studio, a group of 4, and then some of the larger making spaces. That mix is going to move around. We're quite confident that we have the overall square footage, but I wouldn't say that we have actually perfected the exact plan for all of those different scale spaces. But to your question, yes, a real variety of spaces. And then the kitchen. The kitchen's here because the cafe is meant to be right there. So we do have a plan for that, although that we may evolve that. I didn't mention that loading is off of 6th Avenue, so trucks can pull in off of that street and then load into the rest of Bakehouse.
Hi, I have a question about the residencies, the affordable flats. Are these entirely reserved for artists, partially reserved for artists, not particularly reserved for anybody at all? How is that going to work? And if you are an artist with a studio there, do you get a preference? And if you leave the studio, do you get basically evicted?
I think Kathy's going to answer that.
Kathy will address it, but
Yeah, we're going to kick everybody out. No, of course not. It will, I mean, right now, it depends on the funding. Why we're going to try to seek funding from philanthropy to do most of this is to have more flexibility about how we do the housing. We're thinking of it in general, what we'd like to be able to do. We have 3 very large schools in this area that are very challenged to keep teachers. As the population intensifies here, the schools will hopefully get better. We'll get better quality of teachers if we have affordable housing. So we're thinking about it, that there will be a certain amount of housing for artists, and our artists prefer, depending on how we finance it. There will be other spaces for educators. And this is like an arts and humanities district between the artists, and we have a strong relationship with the schools, and they with us. So we're thinking artists, cultural workers, other essential workers who need to work in the neighborhood. But we want this to be a real community. We don't want this to be a precious artist enclave, and that's why it's so porous and open. But again, you know, with a certain preference for artists, because our mission is to support artists, but not at the exclusion of other people who might create a really interesting community.
So one of the things I've had is that we're thinking about creativity broadly, not simply visual arts, but how to create a dynamic, creative community of people with many varied interests and who are all contributing to create a place that's unlike anywhere else. So weaving that together is going to take time. We're going to have to figure it out. The programming is going to be figured out, but it's the strategic outcome is to create a really vibrant, differentiated place in Miami where people can focus on being creative and not worry about the usual constructs of living here. Somebody's mic, yeah.
I think I've got the mic. Do you mind going back to the one with the night lights? I really like the design a lot. I like the concept of the lighting, the one before, with the visuals on that one. This one was actually my favorite. So compliments on the design and the use of space and the use of landscape and greenery. I did have a question though on the grey block. The one at the back.
Back,
Yeah.
that's the county site.
Sorry?
That's where the massing of the county site.
Okay. So I wondered if there was going to be any room for you to put a mural or some sort of full wall artist to just make it distinctively Miami sort of retro, you know. theme.
I hope so, because it is, we're not completely sure how that site will be developed. We hope Bakehouse will have a real involvement in that, and I think that's a really fantastic idea, that building should be a real contributor to the idea of this block as an arts-centric block. I'm sure that will be a bit of a negotiation, but it's set up for exactly that.
Yeah, because in Europe they make use of the walls even with trees and women's faces, so it'll be very distinctive. So, thank you.
I don't need the microphone. I just wanted to ask if there were any projects you've worked on in the past or other projects. Oh, sorry. I wanted to just ask if there were any projects you've worked on or other, I know this is a unique opportunity, but other projects that were inspirational in the way you thought about designing the Bakehouse space.
That's interesting. I don't think there's an exact equivalent to what Bakehouse is doing. That's, I think, one of the really interesting things in terms of how forward it is looking. I feel like I've been inspired by a number of different pieces that we're trying to bring together here. For instance, the project I mentioned at the very beginning, the Inner City Arts that we built, was one of my very first projects in the Skid Row district in Los Angeles. It's a project that was multiple phases, multiple buildings, and started as a public-private collaboration, nonprofit collaboration with the Unified School District to provide arts education for young kids. What happened then over the subsequent years was that Inner City Arts became, I've said in the past, not so much a community center, but really a center of community, because the kids were there, the kids got older, they would come back and teach the younger children. Parents and families would start to come for classes on the weekend. Inner City Arts started to offer more resources to the community as a whole, and in a place like Skid Row, where everything was isolated and siloized and separated, all of a sudden there was a place that was creating real linkages. What's interesting is then, over the years, we've built a number of affordable housing projects around Inner City Arts. And our very first affordable housing project happened because the nonprofit developer, Skid Row Housing Trust, had offices a block down from Inner City Arts. And when they were beginning to try to do this very ambitious, affordable, permanent supportive housing project, they thought, well, if they can do that here, maybe they can really take on housing. And I think that connection, the idea of the resonance of that connection was important. Now that area, you can begin to see, it's not all on one block, but you can begin to see how housing and the services that are a part of that, the life on the street, starts to intersect with this cultural and educational space. And that has really taken off. So I think it's really about identifying certain parts that do resonate. I have to say there's a personal side of this for me as well. And I know Rudy and Rocco know about this. We all first went to architecture school at an art school, Rhode Island School of Design. And that was a place where you lived and worked in the most complete way. You know, you lived around the campus was the center of that creative life. And it had such an effect on the city around it. It was really a lively heart that a city like Providence, which was struggling and has had any number of struggles over the years, leaned on heavily as really a kind of connective light in the community. So for me, this idea of living and making of art and cultural enterprise at the center of community and lively city is something that has been on my mind and I've been thinking about and maybe even trying to recreate in many ways over the years. And that, again, is one of the things that's so exciting here. Bakehouse is, in fact, doing it. It's on the cusp of really creating exactly that kind of almost utopic vision of how we can live together.
Sorry, I have the mic. My question is really maybe directed better to Kathy. It's about staging and whether you intend to do the full capital raise before you start any of this, or you are going to renovate this building. And as a side question, when this building is renovated, what happens to the artists who are here now? Where do they go?
All good questions, and some of those things are not totally resolved yet. We have spoken about the fact that we will need swing space for everybody, but it'll likely be done in phases. I mean, what we need to do now is, this is really just sort of testing, do we have it right? Then we will be sitting down with Michael and really coming up with a timeline. Like, if we had, what are the next steps that we have to undertake? But right now, we wanted to make sure we had the vision right, and then go into the next steps. We won't need the money all at once. We'll need a chunk of money to advance the architecture and design planning, to further our plans, meet with public officials, we have a lot of work to do. But I feel like if we get a sense that we've hit the spot, and this is something that really resonates, that everybody in the city thinks is important, I believe that we will be able to achieve our fundraising. It's not that much money in the context of things. And basically, we've done very sophisticated financial modeling for when this is done. And the way we've programmed and designed the spaces are such that all we really need is money to build the building. We've already programmed what it would cost to run it, the types of rents we would derive, based on an 80% and below average median income, repair, replacement, operations. We went through, had it tested by different construction companies, and so I feel really confident that, the numbers will change, relatively speaking, but then I feel that at least we can produce accurate numbers. And I think this idea of raising the private money, we just need the first gift. We're working on some possibilities, and the first chunk we need to do is to get this further along in the design. But as we plan it further, we'll be addressing the issues and the sequencing and the timing of how we build and where people will go and how it'll shift. So not all those details are worked out, but it isn't something that we haven't thought about and will need to do.
Yeah.
Would it be possible to take a look at where the new studios are again, the slide with that? Where it kind of goes into the garden. Because there was an image where you showed how you would kind of walk through the hallways and there would be these sort of curved walls, and I love the integration of the out and the in, and this idea of it almost becoming like a desire path that you can kind of meander through the space. But then my initial thought was, how many curved walls are in those studios? You know, like, I just imagine you have this beautiful space, and as a painter, I'm like, what if you have to hang a major painting on the wall and it's all curved?
That's right, that's right.
So that was just the thought. And then also the porch idea. I love the gardens that follow the porch. And my immediate thought was kind of, if there was a pitch on that, would it then serve as like a self-watering system to kind of rid the water from the top? Because I started thinking about hurricanes and water and the sitting on top of the saw roof.
Well, to that last point first, I certainly we need to be thinking through as we develop the project the kind of overall environmental program for the architecture. And we do for all of our work, but those kinds of ideas, like capturing water from the roof that we can use for the gardens, I think absolutely is spot on as an approach and an idea. To that point around the curved walls, we've had conversations as we've been developing it at times with a number of the artists here, and everybody has raised that same question. The thing that we've tried to do in the plan, and we would continue to refine it, is that the spaces where the greatest curves happen, the tightest radiuses, would likely be more common spaces, meeting rooms, spaces that might have equipment in it, but not necessarily be wall spaces that you were doing wall work. In some of the more gentle curves along that edge, we've thought that the inside wall would likely be a flat wall, but the outside wall would have that very gentle curve. So that's something we have to continue to work on, but we're definitely mindful of that.
What's the material? I mean, what is this, like poured concrete? Is this like cinder blocks, like normal Miami construction? Like, another question we have had to.
Can I just? Sure. So I think every project lives or dies off the details, for sure. Right? What's the angle of this, of that? How do we get the spaces? What are the things that we made of? Right? That all matters. I think the question that was running through my head, really as a strategist, is the idea, the creation of this place. Is it worthy of support from the community? Is it something that we all share as a possible vision for the future? The money will take care of itself, and I'm not minimizing raising money because it's not easy. Right? But the question is this project a thing that we can all support, that we can get behind, that we think Miami will benefit from doing? And that's, for me, the question that I want us to answer tonight, so that we can delve into the details, figure out the really rough edges of it, and make it work. Somebody wait in the back.
So Jason, to try to get to that, maybe can we talk more about how you activate this campus so that you don't have the sort of dead zones that we see in artist studio spaces? Artists are going to make on their own time and their own terms, and so there's a lot of time where artist studio spaces, they'll come in at 2 a.m. That's not when the public is here. So how does this campus stay animated? Because you're talking about the value. I see the value for artists. How do you build the value for the community? I heard about a cafe, the affordable housing. and the green spaces, you know, how permeable to the community is this space being planned? Are there spaces like community event spaces, you know, things that are classrooms for people to be able to access and use, like the wonderful ceramic studio or carpentry shops, like that aren't just for artists, but can be for community. Like those are the kinds of functional building program components that I think we want to hear more about to see that value statement.
I think it's a great question, and I immediately think of Michael's analogy to Risley, right? Where you're building a place where people live and they work. Where, so of course, not everybody living here will be working here, but there's a vibrancy to what's going on, where yes, there is things happening all the time. Programming got to be figured out. How artists use their studios. We've got to set some boundaries around that. But those are the details of how we make sure that the community is vibrant, that people are doing great work here, that it becomes a place where people want to do great work. And that's what we have to do collectively in the future. But if you want us to dig into some of the specific questions, I know Kathy, do you have any thoughts?
I mean, I think like you said, is those are the types of things that we have to think about. And we have initially in our program brief looked at the idea of, you know, maximizing the use of the spaces. And that basically, I mean, Bakehouse was provided to really support young artists or artists at different parts of their careers. So the way that the anticipated space here is that if you're just getting out of school, recognizing we've been testing this now for 8 years. Most artists get out of school, they're really talented, they've been dreaming of being an artist, they've got into the best magnet schools, New World or otherwise, and then they go off to the best art schools, they come back to Miami, and instead of getting a studio, they get 5 jobs. So this will anticipate that they have a foot in the door. Artists need, what we've learned from our artists, or what they've been telling us, and we've been doing this through numbers of surveys every year, is just having an attachment to a peer community, strong peer community. It's not so much about how much real estate they have, it's the like Jason and Michael said, those big maker spaces. Yes, there will be large wood spaces, wood shops, metal shops, ceramics that will be used by multiple artists at the same time and used by other artists who are not necessarily a resident artist. There will be maybe tiny spaces, maybe the photographers will not need anything but just equipment and a room to lock up their camera and their computer. You know, as somebody advances into the need for a full-time practice, there is adaptability in the way we're designing it, so that if somebody has a big project, there will be project rooms. If the project room isn't needed for a project, it could be a classroom. If it's not a classroom, it's a film screening room. So there's a lot of flexibility, and that has to do with, you know, the programming, but we're not working on the detail of that, but we are well aware that we cannot afford to have any underutilized space created because, you know, that we will work with artists at their terms or what they need to be at their point in life, and everybody will have a foot in the door and a piece of real estate and a lot of opportunity and a lot of peer support and a great community to work within. So I think the rest of it will come as we get further into it and we really get the artists much more involved. And they've been involved from the beginning, but as we see how practices in art making, it evolves here. And like Jason said, right now this space was just built for visual artists. It doesn't work. But we have lots of artists who want to be here, who are using sound, who are using technology, doing things that don't really need a lot of space. So again, we're not just thinking of painting on the walls in every space or a ceramic object. There's a much broader definition of creativity that we're hoping to really to apply in terms of what we're seeking. Yeah.
Like there was a bunch of hands, did you?
Sure, thank you. Well, first I wanted to congratulate you for thinking boldly about the future of the space and something that's so necessary for our creative community. I wanted to mention that I see this almost like a city, a mini city. You're providing a place to work, a place to live, creative spaces that are porous for the community to engage with. I don't know what the details are in working with the county, but you have schools all around us, you have an idea for a food market. The other thing that is needed for people is health. So maybe that would be an incentive for the county, having a clinic or medical care that is accessible as part of the community offerings of this microcity. Similarly, daycare or anything else that enhances the life to work day of the community that lives around it, and also could help subsidize some of the programs. And the other comment I wanted to make is, as you're thinking creatively of the green spaces, thinking about creating an urban habitat that honors native species, that feeds endangered species, particularly kunti. And that can have a very powerful connection. The kunti was the root that the Tequesta, the original native community in Miami, taught the white pioneers how to use, and they made bread. And eventually it almost went into extinction. It didn't happen here because that was banned before the Bakehouse, the American Bakehouse Company opened, but it's part of the history and a vehicle to honor the original peoples of this place, and also could serve as a space for other community members to have access to clean water or a solar-powered charging stations after a storm. So these uses just transient spaces normal in the campus that also invite other members of the community to utilize. And lastly, I wanted to suggest there's a project in Memphis, Tennessee called Crosstown Concourse that was a converted Sears storage place, massive, and they built an urban city. It's really a vertical city, and the programming and how they have connected housing, healthcare, daycare, and aesthetics program is astounding. So just wanted to congratulate you and thank you for inviting us to be part of this process.
Those are great comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.
Take a couple of questions and then head over to our reception and
I'm gonna go for it. Thank you, Kathy. Sorry. Congratulations on this next phase. Very excited to see the housing. I did want to ask from the county's perspective, so I'm here, in that capacity, if there were any asks or direct, needs that the county could support, so I can take those, those asks or requests back to my boss, so that she'll know. And then I'll stay on a personal, because as an artist as well, I'm curious about I was contemplating artist affordability and Bakehouse sustainability of the project. So you said artists, have to take 5 jobs sometimes, and that doesn't change a lot when you start, your career. So I'm curious how you all are looking to model it for sustainability and affordability, because there's a point where, the price has to be paid so that the bond can be paid and all of those things. So 2 questions, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, so the first one in terms of the county ask, I must say that everybody we've been dealing with throughout the city and the county, I think part of what we've done from the very beginning was started at all levels, from the neighborhood to the government sector to, the city planning department, to the city public officials, to always coming and reporting before the Cultural Affairs Council, to the housing department and the mayor's office and our commissioners. So we're in dialogue. The county, there is a process by which we would have to seek the county land. I think that we've made it clear that we would like to be in a position to do that. We need to get a couple things lined up with our own financing before we actually do that, so that we can ensure that we can execute. There have been other nonprofits that have gotten county land and have not executed. We're really into executing and getting things done. So I think we have a good track record, but we will go and make the ask when we feel that we have everything in place to demonstrate that and the right partners. With regards to the second question was about the sustainability. We've done all the financial models according to what the rentals, but there'll be smaller units. Again, we're thinking lots of young people getting out of school, needing a tiny space. Some of the units will be able to sustain, it will be a live-work space. If you're a photographer, or if you are, a digital media artist, or working in some other, time-based art, you might not need a full-time studio all the time, but you might need access to peers who can help you learn how to do things. So even how we consider the housing as supporting our practice and vice versa, I think the numbers, we've done an initial run of the numbers, looking at it into like a 30-year projection, a 30-year pro forma. What would it cost to build? What would it cost to finance? And this was based on affordable housing financing. And it still had a gap. it had a gap because we have a lot of zoning rights and density on this site. But we have designed this always with the intention. When we came into this neighborhood, it was as a resident and member of the neighborhood. And so the design reflects underutilizing the site, but to the benefit of not only the neighborhood, but the overall community. So, I mean, the numbers could work dollar for dollar if we wanted to exploit the land, but I think that right now we're really aiming that if this is something that's so exciting and that we have a lot of support, that the money will come. We really basically have to raise money for the buildings. The rest of it is built into the economics of the site itself, and I'm happy to share the projections.
Of course we will. And one other thing just to remember, and Kathy highlighted this in her intro talk, was that we have a very valuable asset here. And so a lot of this is about unleashing the cash that we're sitting on, right? So that's one of the features of the organization, that that our real estate's worth at least $25, maybe $30 million today, and it's really a question of how do we balance it and come with a solution that actually unleashes that and also provides value for the neighborhood. So that's a rub that's not obvious unless. So I know there's a bunch of other questions. Kathy, do we want to?
I mean, is there something that somebody absolutely needs to say in public? Otherwise, we can. Michael Mandelberg. I mean, if somebody, Roberto, you have something to.
Well, I just want to thank you for your project. Really, it's a fantastic vision for the city. And I want to share something, not just with you, but the rest of the public, because Sally and I have been in several of your projects, and they're fantastic. I think it's important that all of you know that the work that he has done, that his office has done in LA, is truly at the forefront of architecture in many, many regards. And the thing that I would underline is that his projects actually are much, much better in the flesh than in pictures. And that I think I consider the best comment that I can make.
Thank you.
They have made an incredible impact in the neighborhoods. They're affordable in many, many regards, but they also have a vision, and it's it was very interesting for us, my partner Rosario, Marco, and I, to see projects that on the one hand were affordable, were able to be built, and on the other hand, had something to say that went beyond the everyday life, and it became part of it at the same time. So, thank you for
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberto. All right, Michael, anybody? Please join us over. You'll see the beautiful future project model. Join us for some wine and fast hors d'oeuvres. And thank you all so much for being here tonight.
Sorry.